Welcome to Season 5 of the Let's Talk Data podcast series, presented by SAP, where we explore game-changing technologies with leading experts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Let's Talk Data podcast. My name is Bill Kahn, and I'll be your host today. And we're going to talk about best practices for your journey to the intelligent enterprise. We're joined by three experts who are uniquely qualified to share their experiences and insights and provide some practical guidance on how to digitally transform your business and become an intelligent enterprise. We're going to focus on three key areas for our discussion today. Number one, data migration. Two, application testing. And three, legacy decommissioning. For the data migration topic, we have Leonard Maganza from our partner Syniti. Leonard, please tell us about yourself.
Hey, Bill, thanks for having me here. I'm dialing in from Houston, Texas. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Syniti, where I've been for 19 years. As I like to tell people, been in the data business since before data was cool. Bill, back to you.
Thank you, Leonard. Great to have you. Now to cover application testing area, we have Oscar Trompe from our partner Tricentis. Oscar?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Oscar Trompe. I'm based in the Netherlands, in Europe, living very close to Amsterdam. I'm responsible for the EMEA region for the SAP business.
And finally, for legacy decommissioning, let me introduce Nick Mauldin from OpenText. Nick?
Thanks, Bill. Hi, everyone. My name's Nick Mauldin. I'm part of the OpenText go-to-market organization, and I'm also based in Texas and been working with the SAP space and OpenText space for around 10 years or so.
Great. Thank you, Nick. So let's get into it. We all know that digital transformation is gaining steam, and customers are not only looking to optimize business processes, increase margins, and improve customer experiences, but also, in many cases, just stay in business. As we know, businesses such as travel, restaurants, some retailers were forced to shut down during this pandemic. The essential businesses, on the other hand, saw increased revenue and business activity. However, majority of the companies fell somewhere in the middle, ranging from some revenue loss and some level of growth, but most are in a recovery state as their businesses return to a steady state level. Such a development would certainly be a welcome news after a highly unpredictable year. However, many executives now also realize that their business processes are not as digital as they thought they were. In today's podcast, we will dig a little deeper into understanding the challenges that the businesses are facing and what kind of solutions and best practices would make their journey to a digital or an intelligent enterprise as successful as possible. I find it helpful to talk with a specific customer situation in mind. So I've asked our guest speakers to imagine a global consumer product company with over 10 billion in revenue and 30,000 employees, has multiple SAP ECC systems, and SAP S/4HANA, and some non-SAP systems as well. Their goal is to become an intelligent enterprise in the next 3 years. They have made the decision to go with SAP and want to start the journey as soon as this fall. What do they need to know when it comes to data migration? Do they simply lift and shift all their data? And what about application testing? They have built some customized applications, like many have. How do they test those, or do they need to test those? And finally, what do they do with the legacy systems once they have made that move? To answer all these questions, let me start with Leonard first. One of the key areas of complexity when moving to a new system, such as SAP S/4HANA from multiple SAP and non-SAP systems, is data migration. Could you tell us what are key challenges and how our customers can better prepare themselves when it comes to data migration? And if you could talk about the kinds of benefit they can achieve by deploying some of these best practices, that would be great, Leonard.
Hey, Bill, thanks again. So first of all, you use the dirty word lift and shift, right? And that is like a really good jumping off point to talk about data migration. I mentioned I'm currently living in Houston, but for all the listeners, you can tell from my accent, I'm sure, as I get more passionate, I'm originally from New York City. And people have equated in explaining to people what a data migration is and the risks and rewards, business benefits if you do it right, to a move. And when I made that move, it was a busy time in my life, and I was one of those guys who said, let me do the lift and shift, and just take everything I had in New York City, move it to Houston, and got a big moving truck, and I loaded it up. But keep in mind, even though I was going from a very small house, maybe it was 2,000 square feet on a good day, I was moving temporarily into a 1,000 square foot apartment. And when that truck showed up, I had big regrets, right?
I can imagine, yeah.
Like putting aside the obvious, like, how was I going to walk around all these boxes? But like, these are the questions I ask when someone says, I just want to do the lift and shift. I'm doing business today. And that's kind of like what I was thinking, right? The first question is, do you really want to pay for all the real estate to hold all that stuff, right? So in other words, and you think about the expensive real estate today in the cloud, et cetera. And now I experienced that, right? I was jamming it in everywhere, and I had to go out and get a storage unit, right? So number one, I should have rationalized, at a minimum, the duplicates I had, let alone the obsolete stuff that I had, right? And then the second question is, as I was sorting through that, I really hadn't reconciled what should be in the storage unit, because I was doing it in a very short amount of time, versus what I needed, right? Because I didn't do this in a plan, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope that's an illustration about, guys, why you should think about data in advance. We think about it, and you already alluded to it, like kind of 5 strategic decisions, right? One of them is bringing all but only the data you need. And that will get coupled with some sort of archiving strategy, because you don't want to keep those legacy systems around. Oftentimes, a big piece of the ROI is, decommissioning things, right? So definitely factor that in. You should think about your reporting needs, not just long-term, but even interim, because that will be a big impact of how much history you should migrate. Certainly, you should think about data quality. My Data for Dummies example is, simple duplicate vendors will undermine your ability to get volume discounts. Duplicate spare parts will have people carrying too much inventory. And by the way, there's a great consumer products example, right? If you think about sizing guides and color grids and today material segmentation, all the things to reduce the number of SKUs and read between the lines, reduce the number of inventory or amount of inventory, right? Huge dollar savings, right? And significant for consumer products. And then think about other things, master data management, not just long-term, but in the interim process. A lot of people do these digital transformations to the intelligent enterprise in phases. What are you going to do in the middle phase, right? Where are you going to create that next piece of master data? Obviously where you need it, but do you do dual maintenance? Do you do nothing and do match merge later? Do you put in, an MDM solution in advance that will federate to both the old and the new system? I mean, there's a lot of things to think through. And then the fifth pillar of this, you may not even know what the word metadata management means or a business glossary or data catalog, but you probably know what personal identifiable information means. And today you have to care, right? If you're multinational, you'll care about GDPR. You're in California, you'll care about CCPA. You get the idea. Particularly relevant in consumer products industries, because most of those industries are B2C, consumer, right? So it's more than just the credit card data today. It's literally the names and the head of household and things you have to worry about. So these are the kind of things you have to think about. We got a lot of people who say, I don't care, I just want to lift and shift. What you're really saying is then I don't care about business outcomes, right? Because things like volume discounts and carrying too much inventory, these are business drivers, right? So we don't view the data in the abstract, right? We view it very much integrated into the business outcomes, which is the reason why we think you can't just do business as usual. And you really need to take this opportunity to optimize the business, to optimize the data.
Thank you, Leonard, for that. Really appreciate it. I totally agree. Data without the context of business is not very valuable. All right, next, we want to talk about application testing, a very critical part of any journey or transformation project, of course. Companies, big and small, are constantly changing their business processes to introduce services, products, and ultimately to become competitive in the marketplace. These changes could come from either within the organization as new ideas or innovations, or maybe from external pressures such as regulatory compliance. How can businesses ensure that they have strong foundation for managing their application lifecycle, especially when it comes to application testing? Oscar, would love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Sure, and again, thanks for having me today on this call. And basically, there is a lot of commonology if we listen to our customers. And let's maybe start with two quotes from our customers. And And the first one I like a lot because he really describes what we see quite a lot, which is, Oscar, we cannot have people spending their time on software testing tasks that can and should be automated. We need future-oriented staff, and we can't afford to make them suffer by asking them needless manual testing. And you will be surprised wherever we go, and most probably also for the example customer bill, we hear this day in, day out. And this one actually I like the most. I've got more automation in my coffee maker than most enterprises have in their testing process. Obviously, the flip side being there's the lack of automation is not only expensive, it also holds back innovation. So what is the problem here? So why is this, and why do we hear this on a daily basis, and how can we overcome this? And if you unpeel the onion a little bit, basically what we see is that the root cause here is that all the testing is being done manually, because the automation rates on average are between 10 and 15%. So 95% of it basically is resting on the shoulders, or 85%, sorry, is resting on the shoulders of the business owners. Because when it comes to true end-to-end business process validation, it's only the business owners actually who know the positive and the right outcome that should be validated. So again, the testing is expensive, it holds back innovation. Now, obviously, the good news is we do have a platform to overcome this, all at the lower cost point that you're spending today. So let's maybe see how some of our customers are overcoming this issue and how we can support you. The fundamental part where we always start the journey, and this is sometimes being overlooked actually, interestingly enough, is, what is the change of impact? Because quite many of our customers, when we engage, they start talking about testing and they start talking about the strategy, but actually, you're not going to test for the sake of testing. You're going to test for the sake of, identifying the needs that are caused by the changes that you implement in your landscape. So how does that work? Let's look at an average SAP customer. Well, the challenge is they have around 3,000 scenarios. And if you multiply that by the number of variables and the variance they have in the business processes, soon you have around 30,000 scenarios that need to be validated before you roll anything into production. And that obviously is something that is very difficult. Now, there is a bit of good news. There are technologies also from SAP to kind of reduce this. But on average, we see a 20% reduction. So that is not really going to do the trick. Now, the good news is that together with SAP, we are able to reduce this by 95% in some of the cases. So I've been personally involved in some of the proof of value cases last 2 weeks, and we saw on average 5% scope reduction on their test effort. And this is obviously making them very excited, because next to the fact that we obviously need to talk about automation, but if you could reduce your test scope by 85 or 95%, obviously that is the key win in here. The way we do this, we will give you a bird's eye view on your landscape, so we can specifically articulate which corners, which areas are being impacted. And then next to that, we will do the mapping to your business processes. So identify, what needs to be validated before you're going to go live. Obviously, again, significantly enhancing reducing the risk and enhancing, the quality of the software that you're going to roll out into your production. And this is exactly when we look at one of our reference customers down here in Sweden that got excited about this, because when they understood that they could reduce the scope of testing, or basically the releases, that is where they identified that they could make the difference, because they're in the business transformation process from a clothing brand to becoming a fashionable tech company. And that is really means that they need to roll out releases on a weekly or a daily basis rather than on a weekly or a monthly basis. And what they see now is that they are able to minimize the business risk, which obviously is key, but also significantly reduce the quality assurance cost at the same time. So we finally come to the point of the test automation. So as you can see, in the conversation, we always try to point out, that we kind of need to take it one step back. But now that we talk about test automation, and coming back to your example, Bill, what we see a lot in the SAP space is that it's not only about SAP. So being able to automate SAP is one challenge, but being able to automate any technology under the sun is the second challenge. And I think that's exactly where we differentiate ourselves from anyone in the market space. we are able to support you by automating your full end-to-end business process in a non-technical way and support all the technologies that you're using. And obviously, again, that will be the key differentiator. And again, if I look at one of our customers using the technology, what we see now is that they are running more than 250 test scenarios on a weekly basis. They just click the button and it goes. They are discovering defects on an early stage without going them into production, and therefore test automation is viewed as highly quality, but also very business relevant, because obviously it overcomes outages that they would typically see if they have bad quality code going in production. Now, the last question we get very often, and particularly in those complex scenarios that you pictured, Bill, with your reference customer, is the quality of the data. How can I validate if my data is correct? And basically, we see three scenarios in this space. One being verifying the data in any kind of analytical landscape. I think we're all familiar with that. As well as for replication scenarios in order to check completeness and correctness of data moves. This is also very important, obviously, as you can imagine. And last, for the transformation scenarios, to check if business rules have been implemented correctly. And again, if we look at enterprise data lakes, customers are building them more and more. And obviously, we're going to make business decisions on the outcome of that data. But if the data is not correct, that is obviously not good. Now, the challenge in this whole area is that data structures keep changing, data keeps changing, business requirements keep changing. So we see a constant change in the environment, and that is putting the pressure on, the validity of the data. So the need for an automated data reconciliation tool is very high in this space. If I can wrap this up, Bill, so basically what I see is that jointly we can significantly reduce the risk, give the agility to customers to adapt, new ways of innovation, all at a lower cost point that they're spending today. With that, over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Oscar. That was so helpful. I know testing is a key barrier, especially when you're trying to get a new idea, innovation into the market, and you want to make sure that it's working and it's tested properly. So, great insights. Thank you for that. Now, back to the basic. We just talked about data and applications, but what about documents, or in a broader sense, content? How can businesses leverage a holistic approach to managing information lifecycle and making sure that once they move off of a system, that they don't have to keep paying for maintenance and administrative overhead just to stay compliant? How can enterprise content management, or maybe simple archiving and accessing information, can help? Nick, would be great to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. When it comes to this type of decommissioning of legacy applications, like in this example company that you described, I mean, no doubt there's going to be historical artifacts that you see in the form of documents that these customers have. Good examples of it would be, I'd say, contracts, invoices, goods movement notices, all sorts of, emails with partners, suppliers, customers, you name it. There's a whole host of document types that these customers across these different legacy applications have either generated or collected over the years. And what we see when we go into and discuss with customers who are facing this type of scenario is that many, if not all of them, are struggling with coming up with a plan to, how to go about managing these. At the same time, you correctly pointed out earlier that, this volume of information that's being brought into, and distributed within today's enterprises is growing quite a bit. So a lot of data, a lot of documents that are being created as part of these companies, go about doing their day-to-day business. So with many customers, I would say ensuring this complete view of historical events and traceability is critical to their success. And it doesn't really matter to them where these systems or which systems these documents originated out of. And it certainly, I would say, doesn't matter to their customers, which is really what we should always keep in mind as well. So although this kind of my legacy decommissioning is and how they deal and address their content from those systems is a bridge that they have to cross as part of their transformation. The good news is that with SAP, there's a very wide array and robust offering of document management or content management solutions that's offered. particularly nowadays in the cloud. And that's also something of strategic importance to customers. And that's where we invest a lot of our time and effort, is to ensure that customers can bring this rich and robust capabilities around document management and collaboration into the cloud, and provide them ultimately with that safe glide path for taking their traditional, maybe perhaps disjointed, silo-oriented organization when it comes to documents and enterprise information, and create a nice and smooth glide path to becoming an intelligent enterprise. So the common approach really that we see on addressing the immediate need of bringing over this business critical data and content from a legacy decommissioning standpoint is really focused on what is business critical. What sorts of content and documents have regulatory components and are deemed as necessary to keep from a legal standpoint. And from there, customers, once they've brought that over and have organized it and made it available, not just to be compliant with their own legal and regulatory stipulations, but also ensure that historical view of, let's say, their customers or partners is complete. The next step, and where the customers will be in a good position to go from there, is figuring out how best to innovate on top of this platform of content management solutions, and look for ways to how can systems and applications that relate and generate and manage this content find its way into the modern workplace nowadays, which we see, of course, is driven by SAP. But also we see, emergence of, more and more people operating with inside of Office 365 and inside of Teams. Take that and then also combine it with, how can we intelligently automate some of this content that comes in using, intelligent capture, AI and machine learning driven solutions around automating, taking inbound manual processes coming in via paper or email and automating those processes. I mean, that's ultimately what customers are wanting to do as they transform, is not just change the way that they, not do things the way they've always done, but use this platform that SAP provides as a means to drive additional intelligent automation. And a good example of when I'm talking about content that could be, automated would be, I would say, inbound orders that are coming in from customers. Of course, invoices. Every customer that we work with has invoices to pay. So there's opportunities there to automate those processes based on this inbound information, as well as create some automation around emails that are coming in and exchange between customers and partners. So there's really, in terms of the automation capability and opportunity, it's all over the place in terms of the enterprise. So we take that along with the things that we're doing and the innovation we have with Microsoft and Office 365, and it really creates a good opportunity for these customers to leverage these platforms, driven by the business processes from SAP, to enable this collaboration and do so in a real-time way. The next way is, sometimes we see customers step back and take a very measured and methodical approach to how they go about starting this consolidation and conversion of legacy applications. And for those, that is certainly an advisable way to start, to really start with the basics, just with the archiving and kind of the document access components that SAP offers. And then once they get full grasp of that, and then perhaps at phase 1 or phase 2, look at figuring out ways to in a measured way kind of start to dabble into some of the newer, more innovative types of intelligent type of automation. So that's typically what we see, when it comes to how customers, like this example customer you mentioned earlier, would kind of go about approaching, and how they would work with SAP along with us to map out their journey and get them to that intelligent enterprise. So I hope it gives you a little better idea of an appreciation for, the role that content plays as part of both the legacy decommissioning exercise that customers undergo, but also, how they're using it to kind of advance their mission and deliver better and greater services beyond. So with that, back to you, Bill.
Yeah, no, that's great. So not just legacy decommissioning, not just compliance, but transformation, ongoing transformation. You're more agile. Your business processes have 360-degree the data, and the content as well. So great. Thank you, Nick, and thanks, Leonard and Oscar, for sharing your experiences and best practices as well, especially on how to think about data migration, think broader than that, data quality, bring that in. think of the business context, test your applications. There's a lot of automation that can be leveraged. You heard Oscar talk about, the number of tests that, typically can be done, and you can be audited down to a significantly lower number. And then also overall retiring legacy system, making sure you're compliant, you're not paying for stuff that you don't need to, and also you're agile going forward. So really creating a solid foundation for ongoing business transformation. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Please subscribe and follow our podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you.